Oh, this guy. See, they're going to go to a class. Oh, there's the expert. You get like 500 Jews in a room, and it's like, yeah, sit down. We know more than you do. Everybody thinks they know more than everybody else. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've often acted like Korach. I remember I was taking this political science class in college, and I would like argue with the professor because he was left wing and I was right wing. But I didn't just argue with him. I kind of like spoke to the whole class. Said, well, I think what the professor's saying is, inaccurate and unfair, and I think people should, consider this perspective and that perspective. And I was becoming increasingly obnoxious. So finally, the professor just like totally dressed me down in front of the class, like so severely. Nothing like this had ever happened to me in a classroom. Then when it came time for the exams, I wrote a totally A-grade paper. He gave it a B grade, and therefore I got a B for the course. I liked the professor, and I took many more classes from him, and I got all A's. And after I left college, I wrote to him a couple of years later. He just wrote back like one sentence, Luke, be very careful how you speak to people or they will hurt you. And I think it was like Sunday morning, I just woke up thinking about that, and I suddenly realized he gave me a B grade as punishment. It wasn't that I misunderstood the assignment, which was what he told me at the time. It's like I only realize now, 20 years later, he giving me that as a punishment, and he wrote me the letter years later just to like wake me up. So, I often like get into conflicts with my rabbis, and because I often think, oh, I'm smarter and wiser than they are, and I just I kind of want to push my way to more power and influence, and doesn't work out so well for me. Remember, there was this. I became friends with this one rabbi.
Wait! Before you get to this next point, I wanted to comment on something that you just said in this huge monologue. You talked about you don't like being ignored. You have to be like the center's attention or whatever, right? I just wanted to point something out to you. I don't know if you know, but I always watch as much as I can, depending how much time I have. I shouldn't say always. I try to always watch the replay of the entire show. Okay? You trying to find the chat room? Okay. And sometimes, like, you're not paying. I watched, and sometimes you're not paying attention to when I'm talking.
No.
You're either got your face in the chat room, or you're doing whatever with fiddling with the camera. Or last week you were watching the TV the whole time. Every time I started to talk, I'm going through the Rubashkin thing. It was the most important video, right? This is the one that's going to break the case. This is the one that's going to make us famous. This is the one that's going to get us famous everywhere. We're going to end up with our huge household names.
Married to Lubavitch woman.
Right. And the whole time that I'm talking for 11 minutes, we're going through well, not the whole time is 11 minutes. I'm talking. It's an 11-minute thing. I'm talking. Levy's watching the Boston Bruins on the set. You can watch 4 minutes straight. He's sitting there watching the thing. And I'm like, Levy, what do you think of that? He's like, yeah, okay. And and I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't help, Levy. If you want to people to pay attention to you and you don't want to be ignored, then you have to not ignore other people, and you have to give them the proper attention too. I'm just saying it goes both ways.
So I remember there was this rabbi that I had published these damaging reports about. We later became friendly, and he said to me, I get the feeling that somebody with you very early in your life abused their religious authority, and you just have a burning passion against anyone that you think is abusing religious authority. And I thought that's really right, because I don't like people who abuse religious authority. I just like, it gets in my gut.
Do you think it's because of something you have with your dad?
I'm not going to say anything about my father, but I grew up in a very religious environment, and there were people who abused their religious authority.
Okay, now let me have a question. We're going to digress for a second. Now let's talk about you've been talking about on your blog incessantly lately about your whole growing up. So I've kind of been watching some of it. I'm not going to read all of it, but I read some of it, and I don't know why you decided to do this now, but you're like, telling us like everything from back then. And I'm kind of curious about a couple of things. When you kind of left the whole fold of the SDA church, and you kind of rebelled against your parents on that one, why didn't you just walk away completely and not be, be an agnostic or whatever? You're secular.
I was secular and atheist for years, from 18 to 22.
Oh, that's interesting. That was like when I was. That's the same time period that I like was in orbit. You know, free fall. You know, just like that's interesting. The same time period. We both have that then. We both like grew up with something, right? And then fizzled, and then came. It was the same time period, 18 to 22.
Yeah.
And you were at UCLA.
Yeah, well, or at community college leading up to UCLA.
And I was at UCLA. So UCLA is like the fodder if you want to like end up in this show. Okay, so that I didn't. Okay, so you did do that for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why I didn't realize that. That was one thing, and then like, you were okay coming back and doing the whole God thing, even though you'd grown up with like the heavy pounding in the God area.
Yeah, it's just that I guess I have an allergy to Christianity. I mean, I know that it's good for non-Jews, for many of them, and it has many beautiful aspects, but for me it just reminds me of my upbringing. I'm just like allergic to it.
You were even allergic to certain things in Judaism.
Yeah, that's true, that remind me of Christianity.
And I just think you've got to purge that. You know, it's like last year we started talking about, like, you know, I started mentioning that Judaism has no room for a universe that's more than 6,000 years old, right? That's complete kafir. We don't have room for that. That's not Jewish, right? And Levi's like, oh, I believe it's possible. And I'm like, then you really didn't convert. You didn't come into Judaism. You had to let go of all the science, you know, science, voodoo, and all this stuff. And then you told me, you said, what's your real reason? Because it reminded you too much of Seventh-day Adventists. That the Christians believe that everything.
The world's 6,000
years old. Your world is, and because of that, you have to reject it. But you can't reject everything. You can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You just got to get over it.
Oh, my father used to always say that phrase. Can't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Okay, I'm not saying it then, because anything that reminds you of your father is no good.
No,
I'm not going to say it again.
Those are great memories.
I'm not going to say it again. I'm going to say, you know, you can't cut off your nose to spite your face. Did your mom say that one?
And the reason I'm writing so much about my childhood is that I'm taking a writing class. So the writing class teacher encourages you to write about anything you want to write about.
Okay.
So she'll just come in and she'll play music, or she'll ask some general questions.
Okay.
And then whatever comes to you, you write down. So I find that in many of these exercises, things from my past will start coming down, and I'll just start writing. So I pretty much write on my blog whatever I want to write. So it's not like it's, you know, the latest news on the Los Angeles Jewish community. Most of the time, it's just whatever I feel like writing. So if I suddenly, like I was watching the Kennedys, this mini-series.
He had a bad back.
Over the past few days, about President John F. Kennedy, is an 8-part mini-series that was going to run on Showtime, but and the History Channel, but because it had a negative or an even-handed portrayal of the Kennedys that showed their dark side, and not just the myth of Camelot, the History Channel, who has like Caroline Kennedy on its board of directors, and Showtime, like all the major networks, turned it down. We don't want to air it, so it eventually aired on some obscure channel called Reels. But anyway, it's on Netflix. So I watched it, and it was it was absorbing. And I watched this 8-part mini-series on the Kennedys, and then at the end, like I get up to get on with my day, and then I suddenly like find myself like bending over, like staring at the ground and saying one word. I said, Kendra. Like suddenly that just came out of me for Kendra. And like, why would that come out of me? It was because for 3 months I lived in Washington, D.C., where most of this miniseries was set, and I knew a girl there, and this was a very pivotal period of my life, because this was when my father basically got thrown out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church ministry, and my life forever changed. So that was a big deal in my life. I was inspired